The '67 Corvette Stingray's engine roared to life for the first time in decades, its deep rumble echoing through the small garage. Mike Harmon wiped the sweat from his brow, a smile spreading across his oil-stained face, as the customer, a quiet, unassuming man, stood speechless. What Mike didn't know was that in just 3 days, his rundown shop would be filled with camera crews, lights, and a production team from Classic Revival, the world's most watched automotive restoration show. The soft-spoken customer wasn't just a car enthusiast. He was James Parker, the show's legendary host, and he'd just found his next star. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The morning had started like any other at Harmon's Auto Repair. The small garage sat on the outskirts of Millfield, a town that had seen better days when the steel mill was still operational. The faded sign outside needed repainting, and the concrete parking lot was cracked in more places than not. But inside those humble walls, magic happened at least. That's what Mike Harmon's small but loyal customer base always said. Mike pulled into his usual spot at 5:45 a.m., 15 minutes before his official opening time. The early morning ritual gave him time to brew coffee, check his appointment book, and mentally prepare for the day ahead. At 43, Mike's dark hair had started graying at the temples, and the lines around his eyes had deepened from years of squinting at engine parts and financial ledgers with equal concern. The shop had been his father's before him. Harold Harmon had opened it in 1978, and for 30 years, it had provided a decent living. But times had changed. Chain auto shops with their flashy promotions and financing options had sprung up across town, and the internet made it easy for people to order parts and attempt repairs themselves. Mike was barely keeping afloat, relying mostly on a dwindling number of regulars who trusted his workmanship and fair pricing. He unlocked the front door and flipped the sign to open, though it would be at least an hour before his first scheduled appointment and oil change for Mrs. Patel's Honda Civic. He fired up the coffee maker and settled at the small desk in the corner to review his accounts. The numbers hadn't improved since last week. If things continued this way, he'd have to let go of Lewis, his only employee, by the end of the month. The thought weighed heavily on him. Lewis was a good kid, 22, eager to learn, saving up for community college classes in automotive technology. Mike had taken him under his wing 3 years ago, recognizing the same passion for engines that had drawn him to the profession. The idea of cutting Luis loose felt like a personal failure. A familiar rumble broke his concentration, the sound of Danny's tow truck. Danny Wilson had been the local tow operator for as long as Mike could remember. They had gone to high school together, and Danny directed as many repair jobs to Mike as he could. Mike set down his calculator and stepped outside to greet his friend. "Morning, Mike," Danny called out, climbing down from the cab. He was a big man with a booming voice that matched his size. "Got something special for you." Mike was about to respond when he caught sight of what was on the flatbed. His words died in his throat. It was a Corvette, not just any Corvette, but a 1967 Stingray in Nassau blue. Even beneath years of neglect, its iconic lines were unmistakable. The car was in rough shape. The paint was faded and chipped. Rust had claimed portions of the body, and it was missing a headlight. But to Mike, it was like seeing a wounded eagle, majestic, despite its condition. "Where'd you find this?" Mike asked, circling the truck to get a better look. "I didn't," Danny replied. "Guy called for a tow specifically to your shop. Said someone recommended you for classic restorations." Mike frowned. Classic restorations weren't his main business. He'd done a few over the years out of passion more than profit, but it wasn't something he advertised. "Who's the owner?" As if on cue, a silver Audi pulled into the lot, and a man stepped out. He appeared to be in his early 50s, with salt-tan pepper hair, and the kind of tan that suggested either outdoor work or good vacation spots. He wore simple clothes: jeans, a plain blue button-up shirt, and a brown leather jacket that had seen better days. "That would be me," the man said, approaching with an extended hand. "James Parker. I'm hoping you can help bring her back to life." Mike shook the offered hand. There was something vaguely familiar about Parker, but he couldn't place it. "Mike Harmon. She's a beauty, but she needs a lot of work. Where'd you hear about my shop? A mutual acquaintance, Alex Reeves, said you restored his '69 Mustang a few years back. Told me you were the best he'd ever seen, but that you don't charge like it. Mike remembered the Mustang. It had been a labor of love that had taken nearly 6 months of evenings and weekends. He'd charged Alex barely above cost for parts, plus a modest labor fee. It hadn't been good business sense, but the car deserved the attention, and Mike had enjoyed the challenge. Alex exaggerates, Mike said, but he couldn't help feeling a touch of pride. Let's get her down and take a closer look. Danny lowered the Corvette from the flatbed with practiced precision. Up close, the car looked even worse and, somehow, even more beautiful. The interior was a disaster, with torn seats and a cracked dashboard. When Mike lifted the hood, he found the engine compartment in disarray, with parts missing and others so corroded they'd need replacement. What's your time frame? Mike asked, mentally cataloging everything that would need to be done. And more importantly, what's your budget? This is going to be extensive. Parker shrugged. I'm not in a hurry. As for budget, let's just say I want it done right, but I'm not looking to break the bank. I heard you're fair, and that's what I'm after. I want to preserve her soul, not just make her pretty. Something about the way Parker said it resonated with Mike. Too many restoration shops these days focused on making classics look perfect at the expense of their original character. They'd replace everything with reproduction parts until barely anything original remained. I understand, Mike said, nodding slowly. I'd want to keep as many original components as possible, refurbishing rather than replacing where it makes sense. But some things will need to be fabricated or sourced from specialists. That's exactly what I'm looking for, Parker replied, a smile creasing his face. Why don't you put together an estimate? Be honest about what it needs, but also what you'd want to do if it were yours. Mike spent the next hour examining the Corvette in detail, making notes while Parker watched quietly, occasionally asking surprisingly knowledgeable questions about the car's mechanics and history. There was something about the man's demeanor that Mike found refreshing. He wasn't a wealthy collector showing off, just someone who seemed to genuinely care about the vehicle. By the time they sat down to discuss the estimate, Mike had filled 3 pages with notes and rough cost projections. The total made him wince. Even being conservative and doing much of the specialized work himself, it would run over $35,000 for a proper restoration. I can break this down line by line, Mike began. But Parker waved him off. I trust your assessment, he said, glancing over the figures. But here's my situation. I've got about $22,000 I can put toward this right now. Is there a way we can work within that, even if it means prioritizing certain aspects over others? Mike hesitated. The figure was well below what the car deserved, but there was something in Parker's eyes, a genuine love for the vehicle that he recognized all too well. Against his better judgment, he found himself nodding. We can focus on mechanical restoration first, get her running right, fix the structural issues, and address the most visible cosmetic problems. It won't be a show car, but she'll be roadworthy and have her dignity back. Parker broke into a wide grin. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. When can you start? I've got a few jobs ahead of you, but I could begin tearing down and assessing next week, Mike replied, still not entirely sure why he was agreeing to essentially work at cost on such a massive project. Perfect, Parker said, standing up. I'll transfer a deposit today. Looking forward to seeing her transformation. After Parker left, Lewis arrived for his shift, his eyes widening at the sight of the Corvette. Whoa, boss! We taking this on? Mike nodded, still wondering if he'd made a sound business decision. Yeah, we are. It's going to be a challenge, but I think it'll be worth it. The owner must be loaded, Louise commented, circling the car appreciatively. Actually, we're doing it on a tight budget, Mike admitted. I'm basically charging just enough to cover parts and a fraction of what our time is worth. Louis gave him a quizzical look. Why? Mike ran his hand along the Corvette's fender, feeling the history beneath his fingertips. Because some cars deserve a second chance, kid. And honestly, we need the work, even if the margins are thin. What he didn't say was that the Corvette had sparked something in him, a passion that had been dormant for too long. In recent years, the joy had slowly leached out of his work as financial pressures mounted. This project, despite its challenges, felt like an opportunity to remember why he'd fallen in love with cars in the first place. That night, after Louis had gone home and the shop was quiet, Mike sat at his desk with a cold beer and began researching the specific model, a 1967 Corvette Stingray with the SEA 427 cubic inch engine, a relatively rare configuration. He made lists of parts he'd need to source, specialists he might need to consult, and techniques he wanted to employ. For the first time in months, he lost track of time, engrossed in planning a restoration worthy of the vehicle's heritage. The next morning, he arrived at the shop an hour earlier than usual, eager to begin. The deposit from Parker had already cleared the full $11,000, half the agreed budget. It was a show of trust that wasn't lost on Mike. He'd use every penny wisely. Over the next 2 weeks, Mike and Louis carefully disassembled the Corvette, documenting each step with photographs and detailed notes. The more they uncovered, the more Mike appreciated the car's original engineering and design. Despite its condition, many components were salvageable with proper restoration techniques. The engine, once fully disassembled, revealed both problems and potential. The block itself was in decent shape, though it would need to be bored and honed. Several valves were damaged beyond repair, and the pistons showed significant wear. The transmission would need a complete rebuild. Rather than sourcing a reproduction wiring harness at considerable expense, Mike painstakingly traced and repaired the original, replacing only the sections that were beyond saving. For the body, he employed a combination of techniques to address the rust, fabricating patches from appropriate gauge steel rather than using off-the-shelf repair panels that never quite matched the original contours. Parker checked in every few days, either by phone or in person. His questions were always thoughtful, and he seemed genuinely interested in the process rather than just the result. He never rushed Mike or questioned his methods, displaying a patience rare among clients. "You know," Parker remarked during one visit, watching Mike hand-shape a small section of the quarter panel, "most shops would have just ordered a reproduction panel and called it a day." Mike shrugged, not looking up from his work. "That's one approach. But these cars have a certain feel to them, a personality that comes from how they were originally built. Mass-produced panels don't capture that." Parker nodded appreciatively. "That's exactly why Alex recommended you." He paused, studying Mike's careful hammerwork. "Have you ever considered showcasing your methods? There are people who would be fascinated by this level of craftsmanship." "Not much of a teacher," Mike replied, making another careful tap with his hammer. "Besides, I'm just doing what feels right for the car. Sometimes that's the best kind of teaching," Parker said cryptically before changing the subject. As the weeks passed, the Corvette gradually began to take shape again. The engine was rebuilt with a combination of refurbished original parts and carefully selected replacements that matched the original specifications. The body, once riddled with rust and dents, was now solid and true to its original form. Mike had decided to keep the Nassau blue paint, carefully matching the original color from a well-preserved section found under the chrome trim. The interior presented its own challenges. The original leather seats were beyond saving, but rather than purchasing reproduction seat covers, Mike found a local upholsterer who specialized in vintage work. Together, they recreated the original pattern using period-correct materials, aging the new leather slightly so it wouldn't look out of place with the rest of the restored interior. Throughout the process, Mike found himself becoming increasingly invested in the project. He stayed late most evenings, often working well past midnight on particularly challenging aspects. Louis showed equal dedication, absorbing everything Mike taught him and occasionally offering fresh perspectives that proved valuable. "You're obsessed with this car, boss," Louis observed one evening as they carefully reinstalled the rebuilt transmission. "I've never seen you this into a project before." Mike smiled ruefully. "Maybe I am. There's something special about this one. The owner seems cool too," Louis added. "Not like some of those collectors who just want a trophy for their garage." Mike nodded in agreement. Parker wasn't like most clients. There was a genuineness to him that was refreshing. During his visits, he often rolled up his sleeves and helped with small tasks, displaying surprising knowledge about automotive restoration. He brought coffee for everyone and remembered details about Louis's studies, and Mike's daughter in college, little things that showed he viewed them as people, not just service providers. As the project neared completion, Mike faced a difficult decision regarding the chrome bumpers and trim. Proper rechroming would consume a significant portion of their remaining budget, but using less expensive alternatives would compromise the car's authenticity. After a long discussion with Parker, they agreed to prioritize the most visible pieces for professional rechroming and carefully restore the rest using specialized polishing techniques. "It won't be perfect," Mike warned as they made the decision. "The restored pieces won't have quite the same depth as new chrome." "Perfect isn't always better," Parker replied thoughtfully. "A few honest imperfections tell the car's story. I'd rather have that than something that looks like it just rolled off a modern assembly line." The sentiment reinforced Mike's growing respect for Parker. Too many collectors wanted their classics to look better than new, missing the point that the passage of time was part of what made these vehicles special. The final week of the restoration was a blur of activity. The rebuilt engine was installed and carefully tuned to factory specifications. The refreshed interior went in piece by piece, from the dashboard to the seats to the carefully restored original radio. The exterior received its final polish, the new paint gleaming under the shop lights while still maintaining subtle cues to its age and history. When the day came to start the engine for the first time, Mike felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Despite all his experience, this moment always brought a touch of uncertainty. He'd checked and rechecked every connection, every adjustment, but until the engine actually ran, there was no way to be absolutely sure. Parker arrived just as Mike was making final preparations. He stood quietly to the side, his expression a mixture of anticipation and trust. Lewis positioned himself near the front of the car, ready to check for any signs of leaks or issues once the engine fired. Mike slid into the driver's seat, feeling the restored leather conform to his body. The steering wheel, meticulously refinished to preserve its original wood grain, felt solid beneath his hands. He took a deep breath, inserted the key, and turned. The starter engaged with a healthy whir. 1 second, 2 seconds, then the engine caught, sputtering briefly before settling into a deep, powerful rumble that filled the shop. The sound was unmistakable, the voice of American muscle, full of potential energy and barely restrained power. Mike watched the gauges carefully. Oil pressure climbed to exactly where it should be. The temperature gauge began its gradual rise. No warning lights flickered on the dashboard. He gave the engine a gentle rev, listening intently for any unwanted noises. The response was immediate and smooth, the RPMs climbing and falling exactly as they should. Through the windshield, he could see Lewis giving a thumbs up. No leaks, no smoke, no problems. Mike let the engine run for several minutes, making minor adjustments to the carburetor to perfect the idle. Finally satisfied, he shut it down and stepped out of the car, unable to suppress a wide grin. "She sounds perfect," Parker said, his own smile matching Mike's. "Absolutely perfect." The final details took another 2 days of small adjustments to the suspension, fine-tuning the headlight alignment, addressing a minor leak in the power steering system. By the time Mike pronounced the car complete, it was 3 days ahead of their projected schedule and, remarkably, just under the $22,000 budget they'd established. Parker arrived for the final handover late in the afternoon. He walked slowly around the Corvette, taking in every detail with appreciative eyes. The Nassau blue paint captured the shop's lights perfectly, highlighting the car's iconic curves. The chrome, a combination of new and restored, provided just the right amount of contrast. The stance was perfect, slightly aggressive, but true to the original design. "You've done something remarkable here, Mike," Parker said finally. "This isn't just a restoration, it's a rebirth. You've preserved her soul while giving her a new life." Mike felt a swell of pride, mixed with a touch of sadness. As with all his restorations, saying goodbye to the car would be difficult. "She's a special one. Take good care of her." "I intend to," Parker replied, reaching for his wallet. "Now, what do I owe you for coming in under budget?" "I'd like to add a bonus for the exceptional work." Mike shook his head. "The agreed price stands. Honestly, working on this car was its own reward." Parker looked like he wanted to argue, but instead extended his hand. "You're a rare breed, Mike Harmon." "Thank you." They shook hands, and Parker climbed into the Corvette. The engine started immediately, settling into the smooth idle they'd perfected. With a final wave, Parker drove out of the shop, the Corvette's distinctive exhaust note fading as he disappeared down the street. Lewis helped Mike clean up the shop, organizing tools and disposing of the last bits of packaging from parts they'd used. "Kinda sad to see it go," the young man remarked. "Always is," Mike agreed. "But that's the job. We fix them up and send them back out into the world." That evening, Mike stayed late to catch up on paperwork. The Corvette project had consumed so much of his attention that he'd neglected the business side of things. The numbers were still concerning, but the full payment for the Corvette would keep them afloat for another month or two. He was just about to lock up when his phone rang. It was Parker. "Mike, sorry to call so late, but I wanted to ask a favor," Parker began without preamble. "I'd like to bring some colleagues by your shop the day after tomorrow. They're interested in seeing where the restoration was done." The request seemed odd, but harmless enough. "Sure, I guess. What time were you thinking?" "Around 10 in the morning? And if it's not too much trouble, could you make sure the shop is presentable? These are some important people in the automotive world." Now Mike was genuinely curious. "Should I be nervous?" Parker laughed. "Not at all. Just be yourself. That's what impressed me in the first place." After hanging up, Mike sat at his desk, puzzled. Why would Parker want to bring colleagues to see a small, struggling shop on the edge of town? And why did it matter how the shop looked? The next day, Mike and Lewis spent more time than usual cleaning and organizing. They swept the floors, arranged tools neatly, and even put a fresh coat of paint on a particularly scuffed wall. By closing time, the shop looked better than it had in years. "Boss, what's going on?" Luis asked as they surveyed their work. "You've never cared this much about how the place looks before." Mike shrugged, still unsure himself. "Parker's bringing some car people by tomorrow. Said they're important in the automotive world. Maybe they're collectors looking for a good restoration shop," Luis suggested hopefully. "Maybe," Mike agreed, though something told him there was more to it than that. He arrived extra early the next morning, making one final pass through the shop to ensure everything was in order. At precisely 10 o'clock, he heard vehicles pulling into the lot, several of them. From the sound of it, when he stepped outside, Mike froze in surprise. Parker was there, standing beside the restored Corvette, but he wasn't alone. A small crowd of people milled about, some carrying professional camera equipment, others with clipboards and headsets. A large van with a logo Mike didn't recognize was parked at the edge of the lot. "What's all this?" Mike asked as Parker approached with a broad smile. "Mike, there's something I need to confess," Parker said, looking slightly sheepish. "I'm not just a car enthusiast. I host a show called Classic Revival that airs globally. We showcase exceptional restoration work and the craftsmen behind it." Mike's mind reeled. Now he realized why Parker had seemed vaguely familiar. He'd glimpsed the show once or twice while channel surfing, though he'd never watched a full episode. "The Corvette was a test," Parker continued. "I wanted to find someone who approached restoration with authenticity and respect for the vehicle's heritage, not just technical skill. You exceeded every expectation." Before Mike could respond, Parker turned to the assembled crew. "Everyone, this is Mike Harmon. What he achieved with this Corvette, on a limited budget and in a small independent shop, is exactly what our show is about. Preserving automotive history through genuine craftsmanship." The next few hours passed in a blur. Mike was introduced to producers, directors, and crew members. They toured his shop, filmed him explaining various aspects of the Corvette's restoration, and interviewed Lewis about his apprenticeship experience. Through it all, Mike felt oddly detached, as if watching someone else's life unfold. During a break in filming, Parker pulled Mike aside. "I hope you're not angry about the deception. We find that people show their true character when they don't know they're being evaluated." Mike shook his head, still processing everything. "Not angry, just overwhelmed. Why my shop? There are bigger operations with more resources." "That's precisely why," Parker explained. "Those shops have turned restoration into an assembly line process. They produce beautiful cars. But there's something missing: the passion, the connection to automotive history, the willingness to put craftsmanship above profit. You have all that in spades." End quote. He paused, studying Mike's expression. "We want to feature you in an upcoming episode. Showcase your methods, your philosophy, your approach to preservation versus restoration. It would mean significant exposure for your business." The opportunity was unexpected but undeniably attractive. Mike thought about his struggling shop, about Lewis's education, about the bills that kept him awake at night. But more than that, he thought about the cars he could save if more people knew about his work. "I'm not much for being on camera," he said hesitantly. "But if it helps preserve more classics the right way, I'm in." Parker beamed. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. Now, there's one more thing." He reached into his jacket and produced an envelope. "This is the difference between what you charged for the Corvette and what the restoration was actually worth, plus a location fee for filming here today." Mike started to protest, but Parker held up a hand. "It's non-negotiable. You did exceptional work and deserve to be compensated fairly. Consider it an investment in your business." The filming continued through the afternoon. Mike gradually became more comfortable with the cameras, especially when discussing technical aspects of restoration. His natural enthusiasm for the work came through clearly, and the crew seemed genuinely interested in his methods. By the time the production team packed up, Mike felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Parker was the last to leave, pausing by the Corvette that had started it all. "The episode will air in about a month," he said. "But word travels fast in the restoration community. Don't be surprised if your phone starts ringing sooner than that." After everyone had gone, Mike sat alone in his shop, the envelope Parker had given him still unopened on his desk. Finally, he picked it up and removed the check inside. The amount made his breath catch enough to clear his outstanding debts, give Lewis a raise, and invest in some of the specialized equipment he'd been eyeing for years. That night, Mike called his daughter at college to share the news. Emma had always been his biggest supporter, even taking business classes specifically to help him modernize the shop one day. "Dad, that's amazing!" she exclaimed after he explained what had happened. "I always knew your work was special. Now everyone else will too." "It's just one TV show," Mike cautioned. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." "You wait and see," Emma replied confidently. "This is just the beginning." Her words proved prophetic. The very next day, Mike received a call from a collector in Seattle who had heard about the Corvette restoration through a friend connected to the show. The day after that, a local classic car club asked if he would give a presentation on his restoration philosophy at their next meeting. By the end of the week, Mike had booked 3 new restoration projects, all clients who specifically mentioned hearing about his work through the classic car grapevine. One of them, a retired CEO with an extensive collection, didn't even blink at Mike's newly adjusted rates, which now reflected the true value of his craftsmanship. When the episode finally aired, the response was overwhelming. Mike's phone rang constantly for days. His email inbox filled faster than he could empty it. The shop's newly created website Emma's Doing during a weekend visit crashed twice from the traffic. Most gratifying were the messages from fellow mechanics and restorers who appreciated his traditional techniques and attention to detail. Several asked if he would consider taking on apprentices or teaching workshops. The idea of passing on his knowledge, of helping preserve not just the cars but the craft itself, appealed to Mike in a way he hadn't anticipated. 6 months after the Corvette first arrived at his shop, Mike stood in what was now the expanded Harmon restoration facility. The original garage remained the heart of the operation, but he'd acquired the vacant building next door and converted it into additional workspace. He now employed 4 full-time mechanics, with Lewis promoted to shop foreman while he completed his automotive technology degree. Parker had become both a friend and occasional collaborator, featuring Mike in 3 more episodes and consulting with him on particularly challenging restorations. The Corvette itself had won several awards at prestigious shows, always with acknowledgement of Mike's workmanship. That morning, a new project was arriving: a 1955 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing, that had spent decades deteriorating in a collector's garage. The owner had specifically sought out Mike after seeing his work on Parker's show, insisting that no one else could properly honor the car's history. As the transport truck pulled into the lot, Mike felt a familiar flutter of anticipation. Each restoration was a journey, a conversation with automotive history, a chance to preserve something beautiful for future generations. The business success was gratifying, but it was this feeling, this connection to the craft that truly mattered. Louis joined him outside, as the truck driver prepared to unload the Mercedes. Another day, another classic, boss. Mike smiled, watching as the first glimpse of the Mercedes came into view. And to think it all started with a Corvette and a guy who didn't tell us he had a TV show. Sometimes the best opportunities come disguised as everyday moments, Louis replied philosophically, then grinned. Or in this case, disguised as a regular customer with a not-so-regular car. Mike laughed, clapping his former apprentice on the shoulder. Well said, kid. Now let's go make some automotive history. As they walked toward the newly arrived Mercedes, Mike reflected on the unexpected journey of the past months. He'd never sought fame or recognition, just the satisfaction of doing honest work with skilled hands. In staying true to that simple goal, he'd found not just success, but a platform to champion the values he believed in. Patience, craftsmanship, respect for history, and the understanding that some things couldn't be rushed or cheapened without losing their essence. The Mercedes awaited, its once magnificent form now weathered and worn, but with its dignity intact. Another car with a story to tell, another piece of history waiting to be honored through skilled restoration. Mike Harmon, no longer just a struggling mechanic, but now a recognized master craftsman, rolled up his sleeves and got to work. The Mercedes Gullwing project presented challenges unlike anything Mike had tackled before. The iconic doors, the car's namesake feature, had warped over decades of neglect, their complex hinge mechanisms seized from corrosion. The original leather interior had deteriorated beyond recognition, victim to moisture and time. And the Street 6 engine, once a marvel of German engineering, now sat frozen in place, a testament to years of inactivity. This is going to be our most ambitious project yet, Mike told his team during their initial assessment. They stood in a circle around the Mercedes, each carrying notepads and taking measurements. The expanded crew included Raoul, a bodywork specialist Mike had hired from a high-end shop in the city, Diane, an electrical systems expert who'd previously worked restoring vintage aircraft, and Vince, a semi-retired upholsterer who specialized in European classics. The 300 SL has unique technical challenges, Mike continued, pointing out specific areas of concern. The tube-frame chassis, the direct fuel injection system revolutionary for its time, and of course, these Gullwing doors. Everything has to function exactly as Mercedes engineered it, while preserving as much original material as possible. The car's owner, Edward Blackwell, was a software entrepreneur with a growing collection of significant automobiles. Unlike many wealthy collectors, he showed a genuine appreciation for the history and engineering of his vehicles. When he'd contacted Mike after seeing the Classic Revival episode, their conversation had focused not on how shiny the finished product would be, but on the philosophy behind the restoration. I don't want a glorified replica, Blackwell had explained during their initial meeting. I want this car's story preserved along with its function. Every ding earned through its life tells part of that story. This approach aligned perfectly with Mike's own restoration philosophy, which had earned him his newfound reputation. While many high-end shops created over-restored showpiece cars more perfect than they'd been when new Mike strived for historical authenticity, a restoration under his guidance would return a vehicle to excellent condition while respecting its journey through time. The Mercedes project commenced with meticulous documentation. Before a single bolt was turned, every aspect of the car was photographed, measured, and cataloged. Louis developed a digital system for tracking each component through the restoration process, ensuring nothing would be misplaced or forgotten during what would likely be months of work. The history of this particular Gullwing is fascinating, Louis told Mike one evening as they reviewed the car's documentation. It was originally sold to a Spanish industrialist, then made its way to Argentina, in the 1960s. It disappeared from records for nearly 20 years before resurfacing in a California collection in the 1990s. Blackwell Bry purchased it at auction 5 years ago but never had it restored. Why? Mike nodded, studying the chassis plate. That explains the unusual color combination. This wasn't a standard production specification, it was a special order. He ran his hand along the faded paint, once a deep burgundy, but now dulled to a rusty brown. We'll need to match this exactly, not just use a factory standard color. The disassembly phase took nearly a month, with each component carefully removed, labeled, and assessed. The team discovered unexpected challenges, previous repairs done with improper techniques, non-original parts installed decades ago, and structural issues that would require specialized attention. Rather than viewing these as setbacks, Mike saw them as part of the car's narrative. "This patch here," he explained to Raoul, while examining a section of the floorpan. "Someone did this repair in the 1970, judging by the materials. It's not correct for the original car, but it's been part of this Gullwing's journey for nearly 50 years. We'll document it, then do the repair properly, while honoring the fact that someone once tried to keep this car alive with the skills they had." End quote. This nuanced approach distinguished Mike's work from many restorers. He wasn't simply returning cars to factory specifications, he was preserving their lived history while ensuring they could continue their journey in proper working order. The 300 SL's complex mechanical fuel injection system, the first ever used in a production car, presented particular challenges. Parts were no longer available, and few mechanics had experience with the original Bosch system. Mike spent evenings researching, eventually connecting with a retired Mercedes-Benz engineer in Stuttgart who agreed to consult via video calls. "The tolerances are incredibly precise," the German engineer explained during one of their sessions. This was cutting-edge technology for 1955. Even small deviations from the original specifications will affect performance. Mike dedicated 2 full weeks solely to the injection system, disassembling, cleaning, and rebuilding it with painstaking attention to detail. When Lewis questioned whether it wouldn't be easier to convert the car to modern electronic injection, a common modification, even in high-end restorations, Mike was adamant. "That would be erasing history," he insisted. "This fuel injection system was revolutionary. It's part of what makes this car significant. Our job isn't to make it easier, it's to preserve the engineering achievement." As work on the Mercedes progressed, Mike's phone continued to ring with new opportunities. Parker called about filming another episode featuring the Gullwing restoration. A major auction house inquired about Mike potentially serving as an authentication consultant. A luxury car manufacturer invited him to speak at an event for their top clients. The attention was flattering, but also distracting. Mike found himself spending more time on calls and emails, and less time with his hands on the cars, the work that had built his reputation in the first place. "You need an assistant," Emma told him during one of her weekend visits from college. She'd switched her major to business administration with a focus on marketing, inspired by her father's sudden success. "Someone to handle the business side, so you can focus on the restoration work." Mike resisted initially. The shop had always been a small, personal operation. The idea of becoming a business person, rather than a craftsman, didn't appeal to him. "I'm not trying to turn this into a corporate operation," he explained to Emma. "The personal touch is what makes our work special." "Having help doesn't mean losing the personal touch," Emma countered. "It means you can spend more time doing what you love and what you're best at. The business side is important too, it's what keeps the shop running." After a particularly frustrating day spent entirely on administrative tasks rather than working on the Mercedes, Mike reluctantly admitted Emma was right. The following week, he hired Patricia, a semi-retired office manager with experience in the automotive industry, to handle the growing administrative demands. "Your job," he told her during the interview, "is to keep everything else running so my team and I can focus on the cars. Can you do that?" Patricia, a no-nonsense woman in her early 60s with an efficient manner and quick wit, had smiled confidently. "Mr. Harmon, I manage the front office for a dealership group with 6 locations and over 100 employees. I think I can handle your operation." She proved to be exactly what the shop needed. Within 2 weeks, Patricia had organized the chaotic filing system, implemented new software for tracking inventory and client communications, and created a scheduling protocol that maximized the DAI's team's productivity. Most importantly, she fielded initial client inquiries, weeding out those who weren't aligned with the shop's restoration philosophy before they took up Mike's time. "This gentleman wants his Ferrari restored in 6 weeks for a show," she informed Mike one morning, handing him a cup of coffee exactly how he liked it. I explained our process takes considerably longer and suggested 3 other shops that might accommodate his timeline. Mike smiled gratefully. "Perfect. We can't rush these projects without compromising quality." "I also had a call from a collector in Japan," Patricia continued. "He has a Toyota 2000 GT with significant historical provenance. He's willing to wait as long as necessary for your personal attention on the project. I've set up a video call for Thursday morning to discuss details." With Patricia managing the business aspects, Mike returned his focus to the Mercedes. The chassis restoration had been completed, with the complex tube frame repaired and reinforced where necessary while maintaining its original configuration. The body panels, hand-formed aluminum that had suffered numerous dents and deterioration over the decades, were being methodically restored under Raoul's expert guidance. "We're keeping over 90% of the original aluminum," Raoul reported proudly. "Most shops would have replaced entire panels, but we're doing it the right way." The engine rebuild was progressing well too, with the straight six disassembled completely, and each component either restored or, when absolutely necessary, fabricated to match the original specifications. Mike had sourced a period-correct crankshaft from a Mercedes enthusiast in Germany when the original was found to have a hairline crack that couldn't be safely repaired. 4 months into the project, Parker visited the shop to check on the Mercedes and discuss the upcoming filming. He found Mike in the engine room, meticulously honing cylinders with a precision that required both technical skill and an almost artistic touch. "Still doing the hands-on work, I see," Parker observed, leaning against the doorframe. Mike looked up and smiled. "Always. That's the part I couldn't give up." "Many do, you know," Parker said, moving closer to examine the engine components arranged neatly on a clean workbench. "Once they get successful, they become managers rather than craftsmen. They oversee rather than create." "That'll never be me," Mike replied, setting down his tools and wiping his hands on a shop rag. "This is what I love, understanding how each part works, how it all fits together. The feeling when an engine you've rebuilt by hand starts up for the first time. There's nothing like it." Parker nodded appreciatively. "That's exactly why our viewers connect with you. The authenticity comes through." He paused, studying the partially assembled Mercedes engine. "The network wants to do something bigger with you, Mike. A recurring segment, maybe even your own show eventually. The audience response to your episodes has been exceptional." Mike felt a flutter of both excitement and apprehension. "I'm flattered, but I've got to be honest, I'm a mechanic, not a TV personality. I wouldn't want anything that takes me away from the actual restoration work." "That's precisely why you'd be perfect," Parker insisted. Viewers are tired of manufactured drama and hosts who barely know which end of a wrench to hold. They want authenticity, someone who genuinely lives and breathes this work. The conversation continued over lunch at the small diner across from the shop. Parker outlined a vision for a segment called Masterclass that would appear regularly on Classic Revival, featuring Mike demonstrating traditional restoration techniques that were being lost in the age of mass production and quick flips. "We'd film here, on your actual projects," Parker explained. "No scripts, no staged moments, just you doing what you do best and explaining it along the way. We'd work around your schedule, not the other way around." The proposal was tempting. Mike had received letters and emails from viewers who appreciated his approach, including young people interested in learning traditional craftsmanship. The opportunity to share his knowledge on a broader scale was appealing. "Let me think about it," Mike said finally. "This is all still new to me. 6 months ago, I was worried about keeping the lights on, and now we're talking about TV segments." Parker smiled understandingly. "Take your time. The offer isn't going anywhere." When Mike returned to the shop, he found Louise supervising the delicate process of test-fitting the Mercedes restored Gullwing doors. The complex hinges had been completely disassembled, restored, and carefully adjusted to achieve the precise balance required for proper operation. "What do you think?" Lewis asked as Mike approached. "We've got the action smooth, but there's still a slight alignment issue at the rear edge." Mike examined the fit carefully, his practiced eye catching the small imperfection immediately. "Good catch. Let's adjust the striker position by about 2 millimeters. That should bring everything into alignment." As they worked together on the adjustment, Mike found himself thinking about Parker's offer. He'd always seen his role as preserving automotive history through direct action, restoring one car at a time. But perhaps there was another dimension to preservation, keeping the knowledge and techniques alive by passing them on. "Luis," Mike said as they completed the adjustment, "do you remember how you felt when you first started working here? When everything was new and you were learning something different every day?" Luis smiled at the memory. "I was terrified I'd break something expensive, but also excited. It felt like being let in on secrets, like you were showing me magic tricks that had almost been forgotten." "That's a good way to put it," Mike Tash replied thoughtfully. "A lot of these techniques are disappearing. Shops want quick turnarounds, and the old ways take time." "That's what makes this place special," Luis said with conviction. "We're not just fixing cars. We're keeping something important alive." That evening, Mike called Emma to discuss Parker's proposal. As usual, his daughter offered clear-eyed perspective. "Dad, this is a chance to make a bigger impact," she said after hearing the details. "Think about it, for every car you personally restore, you could inspire hundreds of people to approach restoration the right way. It's like the difference between catching one fish and teaching a village to fish." "I'm not sure I'm cut out to be a teacher," Mike admitted. "Are you kidding? You've been teaching Lewis for years, and from what you've told me, you basically narrate the entire restoration process out loud anyway. This would just put cameras in the room." The next morning, Mike called Parker and agreed to the masterclass segment with specific conditions. Filming would work around the shop's schedule, not interrupt client projects, and focus on authentic restoration techniques rather than manufactured drama. "Wouldn't have it any other way," Parker assured him. "We'll start with the Mercedes project. There's something special about that car that I think viewers will connect with." The first masterclass filming session took place the following week, focusing on the Mercedes fuel injection system restoration. Despite initial self-consciousness about the cameras, Mike soon forgot they were there as he lost himself in explaining the intricate mechanics of the revolutionary system. "This was cutting-edge technology in 1955, he explained, holding up a carefully restored component. Mercedes-Benz adapted direct fuel injection from aircraft engines, technology developed during World War II. It was the first production car to use such a system, boosting both power and SEA efficiency beyond what was possible with carburetors." As he demonstrated the painstaking process of rebuilding the mechanical injectors, Mike found himself sharing not just the technical details, but the philosophy behind his approach. "Restoration isn't about making something new again," he said, carefully measuring clearances with precision tools. "It's about respecting the engineering of the period, understanding the solutions they created with the technology available then. We could replace this with modern electronic injection, but that would erase an important chapter in automotive development. Our job is to preserve that history, not just the metal it's made from." The segment received immediate positive response when it aired. Parker called to report that viewer engagement had exceeded all expectations, with social media buzzing about the detailed technical explanations and Mike's evident passion for the craft. "We've struck a chord," Parker said excitedly. "People are hungry for this kind of authentic expertise." The network wants to expand the segment to a full 30 minutes. As the Mercedes restoration continued, so did the filming. Mike grew more comfortable with the process, especially when he saw how the final edited segments maintained the integrity of his work, rather than sensationalizing it. The cameras captured the setbacks, as well as the successes, the moments when parts didn't fit as expected, when solutions required creativity and problem-solving. The restoration of the Gullwing reached a significant milestone 6 months into the project, when the rebuilt engine was ready for installation. The moment had been carefully planned, with the entire team participating in the precisely choreographed process of lowering the engine into the restored chassis. Edward Blackwell, the car's owner, had flown in specifically to witness this moment. He stood quietly to the side, watching with evident emotion as the heart of his Mercedes was returned to its proper place. "My father had a poster of a 300 SL on his wall when I was growing up," Blackwell confided to Mike during a break in the proceedings. "He never could afford one, of course, but he loved everything about it. When I bought this car, it was partly in his memory. Seeing it come back to life like this, he would have been amazed. He would have been amazed." This personal connection reinforced for Mike the deeper significance of his work. These weren't just machines, they were vessels of memory and emotion, links to the past that carried meaning beyond their mechanical function. The cameras captured the moment when the engine was fully secured in its mounts, the driveshaft connected, and the complex linkages of the transmission engaged. Mike stepped back, surveying the work with a critical eye before nodding in satisfaction. "Perfect. Now comes the real test, seeing if it starts." That milestone would wait for another day, after all the peripheral systems were connected and checked. The fuel lines needed to be properly installed, the electrical system connected, cooling system filled and checked for leaks, and dozens of other details addressed before the first start attempt. 2 weeks later, with the car substantially reassembled, the moment of truth arrived. The fuel injection system had been meticulously calibrated, the ignition timing set precisely to factory specifications, and all systems checked repeatedly. The master-class cameras were present to capture the moment, along with Blackwell and Parker. Mike slid into the driver's seat, feeling the restored leather conform to his body. The dashboard, with its array of gauges and switches, had been returned to original condition, right down to the precise font used on the gauge faces. He placed his hands on the large steering wheel, taking a moment to appreciate the culmination of months of painstaking work. "Remember," he cautioned the assembled group, "this engine hasn't run in decades. It might take a few attempts." With that disclaimer, he turned the key. The starter engaged with a healthy whir. 1 second, 2 seconds, nothing. Mike adjusted the choke slightly and tried again. The engine coughed, then caught briefly before stalling. "Good sign," Mike said, making another small adjustment. "It wants to run." On the third attempt, the straight six roared to life, settling into a slightly rough idle that smoothed out as Mike made real-time adjustments. The sound filled the shop, the distinctive note of German engineering from another era, mechanical music that had been silent for far too long. A spontaneous cheer erupted from the assembled team. Blackwell's face broke into a wide smile, his eyes suspiciously bright. Even the usually composed Parker looked genuinely moved by the moment. Mike listened intently, making small carburetor adjustments as the engine warmed up. The gauges all showed proper readings: oil pressure, temperature, electrical system, all functioning as designed. After several minutes, he gave the engine a gentle rev, feeling the immediate response of the machinery. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, unable to suppress his own smile, "we have successfully revived a piece of automotive history." The milestone was celebrated with a champagne toast, though Mike insisted the engine be properly shut down first. Blackwell shook hands with each member of the restoration team, thanking them individually for their contribution to bringing his Mercedes back to life. "This is beyond what I imagined possible," he told Mike as the celebration continued. "You haven't just restored a car, you've preserved a piece of engineering art." The engine's start represented a major achievement, but significant work remained. The car still needed final body fitting, paint application, interior completion, and extensive testing before it could be considered fully restored. The process would take another 3 months of focused effort. During this period, the master-class segments continued to gain popularity. Viewers particularly responded to Mike's detailed explanations of traditional techniques, hand-forming metal patches, rather than replacing entire panels, color-matching paint using original formulations, recreating wiring harnesses to original specifications, rather than modern equivalents. The expansion of the business brought new challenges as well. The increased visibility led to a flood of restoration requests, many from collectors with significant cars and substantial budgets. Patricia developed a careful screening process, identifying clients whose philosophy aligned with the shop's approach and whose vehicles represented historically significant models worthy of Mike's attention. "We have to be selective," Mike explained to Luis during a strategy meeting. "We could fill the shop 3 times over with the requests we're getting, but that would mean rushing the work. Quality has to remain our priority." Luis nodded in agreement. "The waiting list is approaching 2 years now. Some clients are offering premiums to move up the queue." "That's not how we operate," Mike said firmly. "First come, first served, regardless of budget. The cars deserve our best, whether they're worth $50,000 or $5 million. This principled approach enhanced rather than diminished the shop's reputation. In an industry increasingly dominated by profit margins and quick turnarounds, Harmon Restoration became known as a place where the craft came first, where a humble Chevy might receive the same meticulous attention as a rare Ferrari if its historical significance warranted it. 8 months after it had arrived as a non-running shell, the Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing was completed. The final testing phase had been exhaustive, with Mike personally putting over 500 test miles on the car to ensure every system functioned flawlessly. The Gullwing doors now opened and closed with precision, the engine ran with silky smoothness, and the driving experience matched what Mercedes-Benz had intended 7 decades earlier. The final reveal was filmed for a special extended episode of Classic Revival. The car was positioned in the center of the shop, covered with a custom-made cloth. The entire restoration team stood nearby, along with Parker and a visibly excited Blackwell. "This restoration represents hundreds of hours of dedicated craftsmanship," Parker narrated for the cameras. "Every component has been carefully preserved or restored using traditional techniques. What you're about to see isn't just a beautiful classic car, it's a piece of automotive history, brought back to life through the skilled hands of Mike Harmon and his team." At Parker's nod, Mike and Luis carefully removed the cover, revealing the completed Mercedes in all its glory. The burgundy paint gleamed under the lights, its depth and luster capturing the exact shade and finish of the original specification. The chrome accents provided perfect contrast, neither too flashy nor too subdued. The iconic Gullwing doors, closed for the reveal, added to the car's distinctive silhouette. Blackwell walked slowly around the vehicle, taking in every detail with evident emotion. When he reached the driver's side, Mike handed him the key, a small gesture that symbolized the completion of their shared journey. "Would you like to do the honors?" Mike asked. Blackwell nodded, too moved for words. He opened the Gullwing door, the action smooth, and precious hand slid into the driver's seat. The key turned, and the engine came to life immediately, settling into a perfect idle that spoke of the hundreds of hours spent on its restoration. The moment was captured perfectly by the cameras, not just the technical achievement, but the human connection that made such projects meaningful. Blackwell's expression of joy, Mike's quiet pride in a job well done, the team's collective satisfaction at seeing their work completed. These were the real heart of restoration, beyond the mechanical details. In the following days, the Mercedes was carefully loaded onto a specialized transport for delivery to Blackwell's climate-controlled garage. Before it departed, Mike spent a final moment alone with the car, running his hand along the fender one last time. "Safe travels," he murmured to the machine that had occupied so much of his life for the past 8 months. Like all his restorations, saying goodbye was bittersweet pride in the completed work mixed with a touch of sadness at seeing it leave. The episode featuring the Mercedes restoration became the most watched in the history of Classic Revival. Viewer response was overwhelmingly positive, with particular praise for the attention to historical accuracy and the obvious passion Mike and his team brought to their work. The shop's reputation continued to grow. Prestigious car shows began requesting Mike as a judge. Museums consulted him on the authenticity of their automotive displays. A major university invited him to develop a curriculum for their automotive preservation program. The small-town mechanic who had once worried about keeping his shop afloat was now recognized as one of the leading authorities in classic car restoration. Through it all, Mike remained focused on the fundamentals that had built his reputation: meticulous attention to detail, respect for automotive history, and the belief that proper restoration required both technical skill and historical understanding. He expanded his team selectively, choosing individuals who shared his philosophy and demonstrated exceptional skill in their specialties. 1 year after the Corvette had first been towed into his shop, Mike stood in the expanded facility, watching his team at work on projects ranging from a humble but historically significant Volkswagen Beetle to an exceedingly rare Bugatti Type 57. The original garage remained his personal workspace, where he still handled the most challenging aspects of each restoration personally. Parker, who had become both a friend and business ally, stopped by regularly to film new segments and discuss potential projects. During one such visit, he found Mike carefully fabricating a door handle for the Bugatti, matching the original design using traditional metalworking techniques. "You know," Parker observed, watching Mike's methodical work, "most people in your position would be sitting in an office by now, delegating all the hands-on work." Mike smiled without looking up from his task. "Then they'd miss all the fun parts." He made a final adjustment to the piece, held it up to examine it critically, then nodded in satisfaction. "There's something about creating with your hands that can't be replaced by management. That's why viewers connect with you," Parker replied. "You're not just talking about preservation, you're living it." Later that afternoon, Mike took a rare break to walk through the shop, observing the various projects in progress. Luis was training a new apprentice on carburetor rebuilding, patiently explaining the function of each component. Raul was demonstrating traditional metal forming techniques to another team member. Diane was tracing an electrical fault in a complex wiring harness, her methodical approach a lesson in itself. The scene filled Mike with quiet pride. Beyond the cars being restored, knowledge was being preserved and passed on craftsmanship that might otherwise have been lost to time. The shop had become not just a business, but a kind of school, where traditional skills were valued and maintained. As he completed his circuit of the shop, Mike noticed a flatbed truck pulling into the lot. Danny Wilson, still the local tow operator, waved from the cab. "Got something special for you, Mike," Danny called as he climbed down. "Thought you might want first crack at it before I take it to the scrapyard." Mike walked over, curious. On the flatbed sat a dilapidated 1940s pickup truck, so deteriorated that its make was barely identifiable. Rust had claimed large sections of the body, the wooden bed had mostly rotted away, and the engine compartment appeared to have become home to several generations of small animals. Most would see only junk, a vehicle far beyond salvation. But Mike's practiced eye caught details others would miss: the unique grille design of an early International Harvester, the distinctive curve of the fenders, the hood ornament barely visible beneath decades of grime. "KB1, Mike said, recognizing the model. "Farm truck. 1947 or 48. They only made them for a few years." He circled the vehicle, assessing its condition with professional detachment. "What's the story?" "Found it in an old barn that's being demolished," Danny explained. "Owner said his grandfather bought it new, used it until the early 70s, then parked it when he couldn't get parts anymore. Been sitting ever since." Mike nodded, continuing his inspection. Most of the truck's issues were cosmetic severe, but addressable with the right techniques. The chassis appeared solid beneath the surface rust, and the engine, while seized, was complete. With hundreds of thousands originally produced, this model wasn't particularly rare, but the single-family ownership and complete history gave it significance beyond its monetary value. "How much?" Mike asked. Danny shrugged. "Scrapyard would give me $200 for the metal. Make it $3, and it's yours." Mike didn't hesitate. "Done." Unloaded in the back lot. As Danny maneuvered the truck into position, Lewis approached, eyebrows raised questioningly. "New project, boss? Doesn't look like our usual high-end commission." Mike smiled. "This one's different. Not for a client, at least not yet." After Danny departed, Mike explained his vision to Lewis. The International Harvester wouldn't be restored to Concur's condition with perfect paint and chrome. Instead, it would be mechanically rebuilt while preserving its weathered appearance, what enthusiasts called a preservation rather than a restoration. "We'll get it running perfectly, make it safe and reliable, but leave the patina intact," Mike explained. "The dents and rust tell its story. This truck worked hard for decades, helping a family make their living. That history deserves respect." Like a preservation class entry at Pebble Beach, Lewis said, understanding immediately. But who's the client? Mike paused, considering the question. I'm thinking it might be a community project, something we work on between the big commissions, maybe involve local students, document the process as an educational tool. The idea had been forming in his mind for some time, a way to give back to the community that had supported his small shop through the lean years. The International would serve as a teaching platform, a way to share traditional automotive skills with young people who might otherwise never be exposed to them. I like it, Lewis said enthusiastically. We could partner with the vocational program at the high school, give kids some hands-on experience with real restoration work. The concept quickly evolved. Patricia reached out to the local school district, arranging for students in the automotive program to visit the shop weekly. Mike developed a curriculum that would guide them through the fundamentals of mechanical restoration while working on the International. Parker, hearing about the project, immediately saw its potential. This is perfect for a special episode, he told Mike excitedly. Master craftsman passing skills to the next generation while saving an everyday piece of American history. Viewers will love it. The community project became a reality over the following months, running parallel to the shop's commissioned restorations. Every Wednesday afternoon, a group of students would arrive for hands-on instruction. Mike and his team taught them to disassemble, document, clean, and rebuild components, the fundamental skills that formed the foundation of proper restoration work. The International's resurrection became a collaborative effort that extended beyond the shop. A local upholsterer volunteered to teach the students how to rebuild the truck's bench seat. A retired machinist showed them how to fabricate simple replacement parts. The community's oldest resident, a 93-year-old former mechanic, visited to share stories of working on similar trucks when they were new. For Mike, the project brought his journey full circle. He had begun as a young man learning from his father in this same garage, absorbing not just technical skills, but a philosophy about craftsmanship and integrity. Now, he was passing those same values to a new generation, ensuring they wouldn't be lost in an age of disposable consumer goods and automated production. One afternoon, as the students carefully reassembled the International's freshly rebuilt straight-six engine under Lewis's supervision, Mike stepped back to observe. The scene before him embodied everything he'd hoped to achieve, not just the preservation of classic automobiles, but the preservation of the knowledge, skills, and values that made such work possible. From struggling small-town mechanic to recognized master craftsman, his journey had been unexpected but deeply fulfilling. The shop that had once barely kept the lights on now had a 2-year waiting list of prestigious commissions. The simple garage had expanded into a restoration center known worldwide for its commitment to automotive heritage. Yet for all the success and recognition, Mike found his greatest satisfaction in moments like this, watching young hands learn to bring mechanical history back to life. Seeing the spark of understanding when a student grasped not just how something worked, but why it mattered. The Mercedes awaited, its once magnificent form now weathered and worn, but with its dignity intact. Another car with a story to tell. Another piece of history waiting to be honored through skilled restoration. Mike Harmon, no longer just a struggling mechanic, but now a recognized master craftsman, rolled up his sleeves and got to work.